Nobody is coming to save you. The officer's words cut through the sound of the rain like a challenge already decided, and the small crowd gathered near the entrance of Brookhaven Estates responded with quiet laughter. Monica Hayes stood beside her silver sedan, water dripping from the edge of her dark raincoat as cold rain rolled across the pavement beneath her feet. The gated community behind the stone entrance was one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the county, a place lined with towering oak trees, perfectly trimmed lawns, and homes worth millions of dollars. Warm light glowed from distant windows beyond the gate, but Monica remained outside, standing beneath the storm while strangers judged her without knowing a single thing about her life. Officer Ethan Cole folded his arms and looked her up and down. To him, she looked out of place. To the residents watching from beneath umbrellas and covered porches, she looked like a problem that needed to be explained. Monica noticed the whispers. She noticed the sideways glances. She noticed the assumptions forming in real time. None of it was new. Years of experience had taught her that some people decided who you were before you ever opened your mouth. Ethan stepped closer. "You keep saying someone invited you here," he said. "Who exactly is waiting for you?" Monica looked toward the neighborhood beyond the gate and then back at him. "A friend." Several people laughed louder this time. One resident shook his head. Another muttered something under his breath that caused those standing nearby to smile. Ethan smirked. "A friend who lives in Brookhaven Estates?" Monica nodded. "Yes." Rain tapped against the roof of her car and flowed down the windshield in shimmering streams. Thunder rumbled faintly somewhere beyond the dark clouds overhead. Ethan glanced at the crowd as if sharing a private joke with them. "Do you know how many people try that excuse?" Monica remained calm. "I am not making excuses." The officer sighed dramatically. "Then help me understand." Monica looked at him for a moment. There was no anger in her eyes. No fear either. Only patience. "I was invited to dinner." More laughter followed. Ethan spread his hands. "Of course you were." The crowd seemed completely certain now. The conclusion had already been written in their minds. Monica could feel it. Yet she refused to let their certainty become her reality. She reached into her coat pocket. Ethan immediately straightened. "What are you doing?" "Getting my phone." "Why?" Monica pulled it out slowly and wiped rain from the screen. The glow illuminated her face for a brief moment. "Because I need to make a call." Ethan laughed. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. "Openly. Go ahead." Several residents smiled. One man even shook his head in amusement. Ethan pointed toward the phone. "Call whoever you want." Monica looked down at her contacts. Her thumb hovered over a name near the top of the list. The rain continued falling around her while the crowd waited for embarrassment, excuses, or defeat. Instead, Monica pressed the call button and calmly lifted the phone to her ear. The call connected almost immediately. Monica lifted the phone to her ear and listened as rain continued to fall around her. The crowd expected hesitation. They expected excuses. Instead, a faint smile appeared on her face. It was small, almost impossible to notice, but it changed something. People who were bluffing rarely smiled like that. "Good evening," Monica said softly. Her voice carried no urgency, no panic, no frustration. It sounded like she was speaking to someone she trusted. Ethan exchanged a look with one of the residents standing nearby. The amusement remained on his face, but it was beginning to fade. Monica listened for several seconds. "I am sorry to bother you." "This late," she continued. The response on the other end seemed to reassure her. She nodded slightly. "Yes, I am still at the entrance." The rain tapped steadily against the hood of her car. Water flowed along the curb and reflected the yellow glow of the streetlights. Beyond the gate, the quiet streets of Brookhaven Estates disappeared into darkness beneath rows of old oak trees. One resident folded his arms and shook his head. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Another laughed quietly. "Whoever she is talking to probably has no idea where she is." Monica ignored every word. Years of working with struggling students had taught her the value of patience. She had spent countless evenings encouraging young people who had been told they would never succeed. She had learned long ago that the loudest voices were not always the wisest ones. "Everything is all right," she said into the phone. "I just wanted you to hear it directly." Ethan narrowed his eyes. There was something unsettling about her confidence. Most people in her position would have become defensive by now. Some would have argued. Others would have left. Monica didn't either. She simply stood there as if she belonged exactly where she was. The crowd noticed it too. Their laughter became less frequent. Their certainty became less convincing. Monica listened again and then glanced briefly toward Ethan. "Yes," she said. "He is standing right here." The person on the phone replied immediately. Monica nodded. "I understand." A cool breeze moved through the entrance road. Leaves rustled overhead. Somewhere in the distance, the events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. Rolled across the night sky. Monica lowered the phone slightly and looked directly at Ethan. "He would like to speak with you." The laughter returned, but it sounded weaker this time. Ethan smirked and spread his hands. Of course he would. Several people chuckled. Monica extended the phone toward him. Her hand remained perfectly steady. "Go ahead." Ethan stared at the screen. For reasons he could not explain, his confidence wavered. The rain seemed quieter now. The crowd leaned forward. Even the security guard inside the gate watched carefully. Monica did not say another word. She simply held out the phone and waited. After a long moment, Ethan reached forward and took it. The instant his fingers closed around the device, something shifted in the atmosphere. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew who was on the line. But suddenly, the evening no longer felt predictable. And for the first time since Monica had arrived, Ethan was no longer completely certain he was in control of the situation. Ethan lifted the phone to his ear with a confidence that felt slightly less certain than it had a few minutes earlier. Rain continued falling across Brookhaven Estates, washing over the stone entrance and turning the pavement into a mirror of reflected light. The crowd waited expectantly. Some residents smiled. Others folded their arms and prepared to watch the conversation collapse. Ethan cleared his throat. "This is Officer Ethan Cole." The voice on the other end responded immediately. Ethan's expression remained unchanged at first. "Yes, sir," he said. Monica stood quietly beside her car, watching water slide down the windshield. She could not hear the voice on the phone, but she did not need to. She knew exactly who was speaking. Ethan listened for several moments. "That is correct, sir." His tone became more formal. A few residents noticed and exchanged curious looks. One of the officers standing nearby tilted his head slightly. Something about Ethan's posture had changed. The easy confidence was beginning to disappear. "Yes, sir," Ethan repeated. "She is here now." Rain tapped softly against his uniform. The wind moved through the oak trees overhead, carrying the scent of wet earth and freshly cut grass. The neighborhood suddenly felt quieter. Even the people who had been laughing earlier seemed less interested in speaking. Ethan listened again. This time his eyes narrowed. "No, sir. I was not aware of that." Monica lowered her gaze for a moment. She remembered the first time she met Daniel Whitaker more than a decade earlier. Back then he had not been a governor. He had simply been a worried father searching for help for someone he loved. Ethan swallowed. "I understand." The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. The words came slower now, more carefully. A resident standing near the front of the crowd stepped closer. "Who is it?" he whispered. Nobody answered. Ethan remained focused on the voice coming through the phone. "Yes, sir," he said. "I understand completely." Another long pause followed. Rainwater flowed along the curb in silver streams. Somewhere beyond the gate, a dog barked once and then fell silent. Ethan shifted his weight. The certainty that had defined the evening was slipping away from him. "You are serious?" he asked quietly. The answer came immediately. Ethan's eyes widened just enough for several people to notice. Monica saw it too. The atmosphere changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough for everyone to feel it. Questions replaced confidence. Doubt replaced certainty. Ethan listened one final time. "Very well, sir." He glanced toward Monica. For the first time that night, he looked at her differently. Not as a problem, not as a stranger, as someone connected to a story he clearly did not understand. "We will wait," he said. The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone and stared at the dark screen for several seconds. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Monica accepted the phone when he handed it back. Then she looked beyond the entrance gate toward the winding boulevard, disappearing into the darkness. Far in the distance, through the curtain of rain, a pair of bright headlights appeared. Then another, and another. Slowly, a convoy of vehicles emerged from the night and began moving toward the entrance. The headlights grew brighter with every passing second. At first, they were only distant points of light moving through the rain beyond the winding boulevard inside Brookhaven Estates. Then the shapes became clearer. One vehicle, then a second, then a third. The small convoy moved steadily toward the entrance gate, its headlights reflecting across the wet pavement like ribbons of white and gold. The residents gathered near the entrance exchanged uncertain looks. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody seemed quite as confident as they had been a few minutes earlier. Monica stood quietly beside her sedan. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her coat as she watched the approaching vehicles. Her expression remained calm. She looked neither excited nor nervous. She simply waited. Ethan noticed that too. The more uncertain the situation became, the calmer Monica appeared. The security guard inside the gate straightened immediately. Without being asked, he pressed a button and the large iron gate began to open. The movement caught everyone's attention. Several residents turned toward him in surprise. Normally, visitors were questioned. Procedures were followed. Tonight, the gate opened without hesitation. The lead SUV rolled through. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. First, it was followed by two more dark vehicles. Their engines hummed softly before all three came to a smooth stop near the entrance. Rain continued falling lightly through the glow of the streetlights. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. One of the rear passenger doors opened. A tall man stepped out wearing a dark overcoat. Silver hair framed a familiar face that appeared regularly on television screens across the state. For a moment, nobody reacted. Then a woman standing beneath an umbrella gasped. Another resident lowered his phone. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Governor Daniel Whitaker. The governor closed the vehicle door behind him and looked across the entrance road. His eyes moved past the officers, past the residents, past the crowd entirely. They settled on Monica. Instantly, concern appeared on his face. He began walking toward her without hesitation. The residents watched in stunned silence as one of the most recognizable men in the state crossed the rain-soaked pavement directly toward the woman they had spent the evening questioning. Monica smiled gently. It was the smile of someone greeting an old friend. Daniel reached her and immediately asked, "Monica, are you all right?" His voice carried genuine concern. Monica nodded. "I am fine." Relief washed across his face. "Good," he said quietly. "I came as fast as I could." The words echoed through the silence. Ethan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Daniel Whitaker had not sent an assistant. He had not made another phone call. He had come personally. Around them, the assumptions that had filled the evening began collapsing one after another. Daniel glanced toward Ethan. His expression remained polite, but there was unmistakable seriousness in his eyes. "Officer," he said. Ethan immediately straightened. "Governor." Daniel nodded once. "I understand there has been some confusion tonight." Ethan opened his mouth, but struggled to find the right words. Meanwhile, Monica remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. Calm, respectful, unshaken, and standing beneath the fading rain. Everyone gathered at the entrance of Brookhaven Estates realized that the story they thought they understood had only just begun. The rain began to soften, falling now as a fine mist that drifted through the glow of the streetlights. No one seemed interested in leaving. Every resident remained exactly where they were, held in place by a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and disbelief. Governor Daniel Whitaker stood beside Monica as though their friendship required no explanation. To him, it did not. To everyone else, it changed everything. Daniel looked around at the gathered crowd and then back at Monica. A warm smile appeared on his face. "You have not changed," he said. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. Monica laughed softly. "Neither have you." The governor shook his head. "That is not true. I have a lot more gray hair now." A few nervous smiles appeared among the residents. The tension eased slightly, but the uncertainty remained. Ethan stood quietly near the patrol vehicle, watching the exchange unfold. He had expected many things when he answered that phone. This was not one of them. Daniel turned toward the crowd. "Since everyone is here," he said calmly, "there is probably something you should know." The entrance road became completely silent. Even the wind seemed to settle. Daniel glanced at Monica first. She immediately understood where he was going. "You do not have to do this," she said. "Actually," he replied, "I do." He folded his hands in front of him. "Many people know me because of my office. They know my name because they see me giving speeches or standing behind a podium." He paused. "But long before any of that, I was simply a father trying to help his daughter." Several residents exchanged curious looks. Daniel continued. 15 years ago, my daughter was struggling. She had lost confidence in herself. She stopped believing she could succeed. Every conversation felt heavier than the one before. Monica lowered her eyes. She remembered those years clearly. Daniel smiled faintly. "We hired tutors. We enrolled her in programs. We tried everything." He looked directly at Monica. "Then someone introduced us to a woman who volunteered at a community learning center after work every evening." The crowd listened carefully. That woman was Monica Hayes. Silence settled over the neighborhood once again. Daniel's voice remained calm, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. "For nearly 2 years, Monica spent countless evenings helping my daughter rebuild her confidence. Not because she was paid. Not because anyone asked her to. She did it because she cared." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Daniel continued. "My daughter eventually graduated with honors. She earned a scholarship. Today she runs a nonprofit organization that helps young people across the state." He smiled toward Monica. "And none of that would have happened without her." The words hung in the air. Several residents looked away. Others stared at Monica with entirely different eyes. Earlier they had seen a stranger standing outside a gate. Now they saw someone whose kindness had quietly changed lives for years. Daniel glanced around one final time. "Tonight's dinner invitation came from my daughter," he said. "She wanted to thank the woman who changed the direction of her life." Monica looked toward the wet pavement beneath the streetlights. She never enjoyed being praised. Yet standing there beneath the fading rain, the events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. realized something important. The truth had finally arrived. And once it did, every assumption that had been made about her began to disappear. For several seconds after Governor Whitaker finished speaking, nobody said a word. The rain had almost stopped completely now. Tiny drops clung to the branches of the oak trees above the entrance road, catching the glow of the streetlights like small pieces of glass. The neighborhood felt different, not because the weather had changed, but because the assumptions that had filled the evening were beginning to dissolve. Monica stood quietly beside the governor. She looked toward the wet pavement rather than the crowd. Recognition had never been something she sought. In fact, she often preferred the opposite. Most of the students she had helped over the years never appeared in newspaper stories. Their successes belonged to them, not to her. Daniel noticed her discomfort and smiled. He knew she would rather be anywhere else than standing in the center of attention. Across the entrance road, Ethan remained beside his patrol vehicle. The flashing lights had been turned off. Without them, the street looked calmer, more honest somehow. He replayed the evening in his mind. Every comment, every assumption, every conclusion he had reached before knowing the truth. The realization settled heavily on him. Earlier that night, he had looked at Monica and seen only what he expected to see. He never stopped to wonder who she was. He never considered what she might have accomplished. He never asked about the story behind the person standing in front of him. The silence around him seemed to magnify that realization. Several residents appeared lost in similar thoughts. The woman who had whispered about Monica earlier now stared at the ground. A man standing nearby folded his umbrella and looked toward the gate without speaking. Nobody seemed eager to revisit the confidence they had shown when the evening began. Monica glanced toward Ethan. Their eyes met briefly. For the first time all night, there was no tension between them. No challenge. No judgment. Just a shared understanding that something important had happened. A cool breeze moved through the neighborhood, carrying the scent of rain and fresh grass. Daniel looked toward the homes beyond the gate and then back toward Monica. "You know," he said softly, "my daughter still talks about those evenings at the learning center." Monica smiled faintly. She did all the hard work. "No," Daniel replied. She had someone who believed in her when she could not believe in herself. The words lingered in the quiet air. Ethan listened from a distance. The more he learned about Monica, the more difficult it became. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. To reconcile the woman standing before him with the assumptions he had made earlier. Yet that was exactly the lesson confronting him. People were often far more than first impressions, far more than appearances, far more than expectations. The mist drifted gently beneath the streetlights while water continued dripping from the trees overhead. Nothing dramatic happened. No one raised their voice. No one argued. Yet the emotional weight of the evening felt heavier than before. Standing there beneath the fading storm, everyone present seemed to understand the same truth. The strongest person at Brookhaven Estates that night had never been the officer with authority, the residents with wealth, or even the governor with influence. It had been the woman who faced suspicion, humiliation, and judgment without allowing any of it to change the kindness in her heart. Governor Whitaker looked around at the residents gathered near the entrance and slowly took a breath. The night had become remarkably quiet. The rain had faded into a light mist, and the streetlights cast long golden reflections across the wet pavement. Most people expected the evening to end there. They believed the misunderstanding had been corrected and the lesson had already been learned. But Daniel knew there was one more truth that needed to be told. He turned toward Monica and smiled gently. "There is something else they should know." Monica immediately shook her head. "Daniel, that is not necessary." "I think it is," he replied. The crowd listened carefully. Ethan remained still beside his patrol vehicle. Daniel folded his hands and looked toward the dark boulevard stretching deeper into the neighborhood. "When people hear that Monica helped my daughter, they often assume she was a tutor." He glanced toward Monica. That description never felt complete. Several residents exchanged curious looks. Daniel continued. 15 years ago, my daughter was struggling in school. That part is true. But the real problem was not academics. His voice softened. She had stopped believing in herself. Monica lowered her gaze. The memories returned immediately. Daniel continued speaking. There were days when she barely spoke. Days when she convinced herself that she would never succeed. Every setback felt permanent. Every challenge felt impossible. The crowd listened in complete silence. Many people tried to help, Daniel said. Teachers, counselors, friends, family. He smiled faintly. Monica was the first person who truly listened. Ethan looked toward Monica. The image in his mind continued changing with every new detail. Daniel shook his head slowly. My daughter once told me that Monica never treated her like a problem to solve. She treated her like a person worth understanding. The words settled heavily over the entrance road. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. Dripped softly from the trees above. For nearly 2 years, Monica met with her after work. She encouraged her, challenged her, reminded her that failure was not the end of a story. Daniel paused. One evening my daughter came home smiling for the first time in months. When I asked what had changed, she said something I will never forget. He looked directly at the residents. She said, "MS, Hayes believes I can do this. So maybe I can." Several people lowered their eyes. The emotional weight of the story was impossible to ignore. Daniel smiled toward Monica. Years later, when my daughter graduated with honors, she told me something else. His voice became softer. She said the diploma belonged partly to Monica. Monica immediately shook her head again. That was never true. Daniel laughed quietly. That is exactly why it was true. A few residents smiled through the emotion of the moment. Ethan stared at the wet pavement beneath his feet. The realization struck him with new force. Earlier that evening, he had seen a stranger standing outside a gate. Now he understood he had been standing in front of someone whose quiet acts of kindness had changed the course of countless lives. The night air felt lighter somehow, and as the mist drifted beneath the streetlights, everyone gathered there understood that Monica's greatest accomplishment had never been who she knew. It was the number of people who became stronger because she believed in them when nobody else did. The silence lingered long after Governor Whitaker finished speaking. No one seemed eager to break it. The entrance road that had been filled with judgment only an hour earlier now felt transformed by something far more powerful: understanding. The mist drifted slowly beneath the streetlights while water continued to fall from the branches overhead. Ethan stood motionless beside his patrol vehicle. Every detail of the evening replayed itself in his mind with uncomfortable clarity. He remembered the first moment he saw Monica standing outside the gate. He remembered the assumptions he made before asking questions. He remembered the laughter, the dismissive comments, the certainty. Most of all, he remembered how calm Monica had remained through all of it. Ethan slowly removed his cap and held it in his hands. The movement immediately drew attention. Residents turned toward him. Daniel noticed as well, but remained silent. Some moments belonged to the people living them. Ethan took a breath and stepped forward. The wet pavement reflected the light beneath his feet as he approached Monica. She looked at him patiently. There was no anger in her expression, no resentment. That somehow made the moment even more difficult. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. "Ms. Hayes," Ethan said quietly. His voice carried through the still night air. Monica waited. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly before looking at her again. I owe you an apology. No one spoke. No one moved. Tonight, I made assumptions about you before I knew anything about you. His words came slowly but honestly. I judged what I saw instead of taking the time to understand who you were. The residents listened carefully. Several looked uncomfortable. They recognized themselves in his confession. Ethan continued. You deserved respect from the moment you arrived. I failed to give you that respect. Monica remained silent for a moment. The mist drifted between them. Finally, she smiled gently. Not because she had won. Not because she had been proven right. Simply because she recognized sincerity when she heard it. Thank you, she said. Ethan seemed surprised by the kindness in her response. Monica stepped slightly closer. We all make mistakes, she said softly. The important thing is whether we are willing to learn from them. The words settled over the entrance road. Daniel smiled quietly. Several residents lowered their eyes. One woman wiped away tears she had been trying to hide. Ethan nodded. I will remember that. Monica looked around at the people gathered nearby. Most people do not wake up planning to misunderstand someone, she said. Sometimes we simply allow assumptions to speak louder than curiosity. Nobody disagreed. The truth was too obvious now. Monica's voice remained calm. The good thing about being wrong is that it gives us an opportunity to become better. Ethan smiled faintly. For the first time all evening, the tension between them disappeared completely. What remained was something far more meaningful. Respect. The crowd felt it too. The atmosphere had changed from suspicion to reflection, from division to understanding. Beneath the soft glow of the streetlights and the final traces of the storm, Monica had every opportunity to embarrass those who had judged her. Instead, she offered grace. And in that moment, everyone standing at the entrance of Brookhaven Estates understood why so many lives had been changed by the woman they almost failed to see. The neighborhood gradually returned to silence. One by one, residents began walking back toward their homes. Porch lights glowed warmly through the darkness, and the wet streets reflected ribbons of gold beneath the streetlights. The storm had passed. The tension had passed with it. Yet something important remained behind. Monica stood near the entrance gate, while Governor Whitaker glanced down the boulevard toward the home where his daughter was waiting. A smile crossed his face. She is probably wondering why we are taking so long. Monica laughed. The events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. Softly, she was never very patient. Daniel nodded. Some things never change. Around them, the remaining residents offered quiet greetings as they passed. The same people who had looked at Monica with suspicion earlier now spoke with respect. Monica responded to each person with the same warmth she had shown throughout the evening. Nothing about her behavior had changed. The only thing that had changed was what people understood about her. Ethan remained near his patrol vehicle. The emergency lights had long since been turned off. Without them, the entrance road seemed peaceful. He watched Monica speaking with a few residents and realized something he would carry for the rest of his life. Character revealed itself most clearly when a person had every reason to respond with anger and chose kindness instead. Monica had every opportunity to humiliate the people who had judged her. She never did. She had every opportunity to make them feel small. She never tried. Instead, she offered understanding. The realization stayed with him. Daniel opened the rear door of the lead SUV and then paused. Ready? He asked. Monica looked once more at the neighborhood entrance. The rain had left tiny drops hanging from the branches of the oak trees overhead. The air smelled clean, fresh, peaceful. She nodded. Ready. Before stepping toward the vehicle, she turned and looked back toward Ethan. Their eyes met across the wet pavement. There was no resentment in hers, no defensiveness in his, only mutual respect. Good night, Officer Cole, she said warmly. Ethan nodded. Good night, Ms. Hayes. The simple exchange felt meaningful in a way neither of them expected. Monica smiled and entered the SUV. The door closed gently behind her. Moments later, The convoy began moving through the open gate and deeper into Brookhaven Estates. The headlights stretched across the rain-washed road before gradually disappearing beyond the curve of the boulevard. Ethan watched until the final taillight vanished into the darkness. Then he stood alone beneath the streetlights for several seconds. Water continued dripping from the trees above. The neighborhood was quiet again. He looked down at the reflection shimmering in a puddle near his feet. Earlier that evening, he had believed he understood the situation before knowing the facts. He had mistaken appearance for truth, assumption for understanding. The lesson felt impossible to ignore now. Every person carried a story invisible to the people around them. Some stories were filled with struggle. Some were filled with sacrifice. Some quietly changed lives without ever asking for recognition. Ethan stepped into his patrol vehicle and rested his hands on the steering wheel. Ahead of him stretched an empty road, glistening beneath the events continued to unfold with additional moments of reflection, observation, and thoughtful consideration from everyone involved. People paid closer attention to details that had initially been overlooked, reconsidered assumptions, and reflected on the importance of patience, fairness, accountability, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the narrative while preserving every original fact, event, and outcome. The atmosphere encouraged a stronger appreciation for dignity, integrity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through careful examination rather than quick judgment. Lights. As he started the engine, he glanced one final time toward the boulevard where Monica had disappeared. Then he drove away into the night, carrying a lesson that would stay with him forever. True strength was not found in authority, status, or the power to judge others. True strength was the ability to remain kind when the world gave every reason not to be. And somewhere, beyond the glowing lights of Brookhaven Estates, Monica continued doing what she had always done, changing lives one act of grace at a time.